Have you ever wondered if what you were told by your spiritual abuser was actually correct? Do you ever struggle with confusion because, on one hand, you experienced harm at the hands of your spiritual abuser, but on the other hand, they also had some positive qualities to them and they impacted your life in some positive ways, such as giving good advice or caring for you in a time of need? My name is Dr. Felucia, and I'm a licensed psychologist and owner of Skill Set Counseling, where I focus on the treatment of OCD, spiritual abuse, and cultural abuse. Today's topic will be within the domain of spiritual abuse. And I'm going to be answering the question that many of you listening might have from time to time, which is, what if the spiritual abuser was actually right? Um, this is a common concern that people who have been through spiritual abuse face. And I'm going to explain a little bit about why. First of all, spirituality is not quantifiable, right? And there are lots of spiritual terms and concepts that you can't objectively define, right? So when people are going through spiritual abuse, they often wonder if what they were told was correct because a lot of it can be cloaked in these spiritual terms that are more abstract than concrete. So let's say there was an example, right? Or let's think of a situation where you brought up concerns to somebody, a leader in the spiritually abusive environment, and they responded by telling you that you are a critical person. You might wonder, well, gosh, maybe I am a critical person. You may actually admit to yourself and have a history of being overly critical with people. And so that can be really confusing and really challenging because you're wondering, wow, if the spiritual abuser was right about this, what else were they right about? And you start to question, you start to doubt. And so it's a completely common and normal response to spiritual abuse. And this is something that I say very frequently in my videos that I want you to remember. And that is spiritually abusive statements often have a grain of truth to them. They could be partially true or they could be entirely true. However, what is important is how these terms are being used or how these statements are being made. And in the case of someone being told, well, you're a critical person, what that is doing is it's avoiding accountability. So you want to look at kind of the intent and also the outcome of these sorts of things. What are the functions of these statements? And so in the spiritually abusive environment, these abstract terms that often have a grain of truth to them, at least, are going to be used to silence you or just control you, basically just perpetuating the cycle or starting the cycle of spiritual abuse. So I want you to think about this when you hear that. Two things can be true at the same time. Let's even go the distance here and say, yes, you know for certain you are an overly critical person. You can be an overly critical person and still see and bring up legitimate concerns in a situation. Okay? By the way, if you haven't already, I'd really appreciate it if you take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. And also comment too. What this does is that it really helps the YouTube algorithm share this information with other people that can find it helpful. All right. So back to the topic at hand. The first question or the first situation I dealt with was when the spiritually abusive person makes a factual statement. The second concern or the second issue that people can struggle with as they're dealing with spiritual abuse or recovering from it is reconciling the negative effects of the spiritual abuse with the positive impact that maybe the spiritual abuse or the spiritually abusive environment may have had on that person, right? So as you're recovering, as you're recognizing the abuse and how it's really harmed you, you might also reflect on how the spiritual abuser or the spiritually abusive environment did some good things for you. So for instance, providing good advice, maybe supporting you in a time of need where no one else did, or providing a community for you when you were really lonely. And so this can be really challenging for people who've been through spiritual abuse, because it's difficult to reconcile the harm that someone did, and also recognize and appreciate the fact that they caused some good things in your life. So again, I want to just validate that experience and let you know that's normal, right? And it is, I think it's an important part. I would venture to say it's an important part of your recovery to acknowledge that both things can be true at the same time, right? Somebody can be kind to you, but also they can be abusive, right? It's rare that we ever see one person exemplify or embody one trait 100% of the time. And so that can, what I talked about before, experiencing some positive effects or positive things in the midst of the abuse doesn't justify the abuse happening, right? Somebody can, somebody can be an abusive person, but still also care for certain people, just do things that are helpful to other people, even give great advice at times. Okay. So that can be just a part of who they are. But I also wanted you to recognize that that can also be part of the grooming process, right? And what grooming is, if you're not familiar with that term, is just basically tilling the ground for abuse, making it more possible that the person who's being groomed will comply with the abuse. So that is a possibility. But I want to say that regardless of whether the positive traits and the positive experiences you have were a reflection of part of the person's character, or it was done specifically to groom you, it still doesn't make the abuse okay. And it still doesn't negate the fact that you are hurting and struggling and just experiencing negative effects from this abuse. So I want you to remember that. And to learn a little bit more about that, I will recommend my video in the spiritual abuse playlist on this channel that's called Love Bombing and Spiritual Abuse, and how some of these positive things that you have experienced may actually be a form of love bombing. And so I will encourage you to watch that video to get a little bit of understanding about what I'm talking about. Okay, so if you're ready to start your recovery from spiritual abuse and you like to book a free consultation with me, you can go to my website, skillsetcounseling.com, and click on the orange button to book a free consultation. You can also click on the link in the description box, and by doing that, you will take you to a link directly to my website to book that free consultation. Okay, I hope you have a wonderful day that is filled with peace. Bye-bye.